All right, hello, you guys. Welcome back. Good to see a lot of you again. Um, we're going to be continuing uh, just game reviews from my recent events. I think I had mentioned last time I was here that I would be going to Europe for actually the first time in my chess career, believe it or not. So many of you guys have gone to Europe more more than I have. So I went to Spain. The tournament concluded just about a week ago, and it went pretty well. It went pretty well. Definitely could have gone better, but of course could have gone worse. Definitely not complaining. I ended up gaining 9 FIDE, scored 6.5 out of 9. Even though I was actually the 40th seed in the event, around 40th seed in the event, because the tournament in total had like 550 people, I actually played down 7 out of 9 games, even though I actually started really well. I started like 3 out of 3, and then I had 4.5 out of 5, and I still didn't play up until I think it was round 6 or something crazy like that. So yeah, I was on actually on 4.5 out of 5, and I still played down, like down in terms of rating. And so yeah, I mean, like chess wise, it was a great experience. I played a lot of new people, played 8 opponents who I'd never faced before, never even seen before in tournaments. Um, and so, it was always nice to just see new faces, play against new faces, play in a strong Swiss event. Uh, Overall, as you guys know, as chess players, didn't get to see too much around the city, just was mostly there for business, quote unquote. And I would say overall took care of business in the sense that I played good chess. I was very happy with overall the level of play. But as we're going to see in the critical moments today from the games I've selected, my play was by no means perfect. And so when I say that I was happy with my play, I was happy overall with my calculation, overall with some of the parts of opening preparation, just my overall form and what I was seeing, what I was not seeing was kind of up to what I was expecting from myself, and overall was making good decisions. And so heading into my next event tentatively at least, will be the Memorial Day GM round robin in New York. So the next time you guys will see me will be the first week of June. Um, feeling very good now about my progress, back to my peak ratings and hopefully on the way to GM. Still, of course, a lot of work to be done, both rating wise and just simply training wise. A lot that I think is still needing to be improved, can be improved, and it's always encouraging to see. I'm talking about my own play. It's encouraging to see the things that I'm doing well, but of course also actually encouraging the things to see the things that I'm not doing well. Because if I felt that I was playing my best chess and I'm still, struggling and still losing rating, then that could be very discouraging. But in some sense, to know that I have not hit my peak, I have not hit the absolute best of what I can play, what I know I can play, that continues to encourage me to keep, well, pursuing the GM title, of course, but to keep playing, to keep trying to improve, studying, training, and doing all these things. I'm sure, and I hope that all of you guys are doing as well. So, with all that being said, this brings us now to round two of the tournament itself. I was playing the white pieces. My opponent played the Petrov, the also very tactical and aggressive Petrov. And we reach an endgame, of course. An endgame where I'm trying to outplay my low-rated opponent. And we reached a very kind of interesting impasse at this point in the game. Now, I played what I would say was a pretty interesting opening idea to get to a more favorable endgame. The early stages of the endgame I played quite well. I did miss a couple of chances to actually apply more pressure than I should have had at this point. With all that being said, I played rook to g4 here. A very actually instructive idea for you guys. Um, because I mean, I didn't have to play rook g4 here. I could have simply slid the rook to anywhere. I also could, of course, play, like h4, king e2. There's plenty of different moves I could play. But I essentially chose this opportunity to play rook to g4 to provoke the pawn to g6, and then rook h4 to provoke the pawn to h5, because with the nature of the same colored bishop ending, I want to actually have all of his pawns locked onto light squares and my pawns locked onto dark squares. And so even though it seems like I've made this weird, or rather kind of wasting of a time type of moves with rook g4 and rook h4, and then obviously very likely the rook's going to swing back towards the center or other ways, I still actually found this to be a very productive usage of my time, but also actually of the capabilities, or rather of the possibilities of an endgame where the pawns being locked on light squares is actually the deciding factor of the game. And oftentimes, these very small sort of changes in the position and what could be weaknesses in the position can actually make all the difference in the nature of whether I win, draw, or not lose here, hopefully at least, win or draw. So the question to you guys, and I'll now limit the chat as we move forward into the stopping moments or the critical moments for the rest of the class, is white to play here. We actually have a very important decision. After having actually provoked the pawns to g6 and h5, our very important decision to make here is whether or not we make this very important trade, or very big trade of rook to d4 check. And as we know in, well, any stage of the game, but especially endgames, any opportunity to make a trade like this with rook to d4, well, can very much so change the outlook of the position itself, and of course change the outlook of the rest of the game. And it's a moment where you're not going to get it back. If you don't play rook to d4 here, you won't be able to trade the rooks. If you do play rook d4 here and you do trade the rooks, well, of course, those rooks are not coming back onto the board. So regardless of how I actually play here, what decision I do make, there will be no going back. We either trade the rooks or we don't trade the rooks. So white to play here, this is everyone's first stopping moments. The question once again is, do we play rook d4 check or not? Essentially, do we trade the rooks or not? I'll give you guys as much time as I thought about it during the game, which was, I think it was 3 minutes. Okay, so our first stopping moment right here, 3 minutes on the clock, and white to play. You guys have about 1 more minute to make that decision. Do we trade the rooks here or not? 10 seconds to get those answers in if you've not done so already. So far, seeing some good answers. All right. So, in the game, I played rook to c4, which is not the correct choice. So, as many people pointed out in the chat, and had made the decision to do so, was play rook d4 and make the trade. And while a lot of people, rather pretty much everyone, was unable to give me maybe like the sufficient, not like the reasoning behind playing rook d4, but sufficient like calculation of what the winning plan is, everyone's inherent like intuition towards playing rook d4 was correct, which is basically after rook to d4 and something like here takes, we bring the king over to d4 and play h4. I saw quite a few people actually give this variation or give this continuation. Intuitively, our king dominates black's king. Our bishop will dominate black's bishop because of the kingside pawns and, well, even also the c6 pawn. Basically, a lot of weaknesses that the light square bishop can target. And what I would say is, if this was your real game, I would probably suggest that either two things. Either, number one, you calculate to this point and try to find some sort of winning plan that you can stand by and be like, okay, I want to go into this endgame because I think this winning plan works out in the bishop and pawn ending. Because the thing is, it could be possible that this bishop ending, somehow black just stays super passive and white has no way forward. It could be possible. The other option is if you see this endgame and you think that this endgame is better, you have a better chance of winning basically than, like a more practical chance of winning than, let's say, well, what I played was rook c4, this ending. And I think because of option 2, I should have realized that my chances were much better in the bishop and pawn ending. And also additionally, I think I should have probably held myself to a higher standard and actually tried to go about option A or option 1, which was actually try to calculate some sort of winning plan. But because I think I had around 35 minutes here to my opponent's, I think he had maybe around 5 minutes, I was trying to apply pressure, and because I knew that it was going to be very difficult to actually calculate a win or calculate some very concrete winning plan after rook to d4, I made what I thought was the practical decision to actually play rook to c4, because I thought there was no way, for some reason, I thought during the game that there was no way that rook to d4 was winning. I thought that black had enough waiting moves and passive moves to hold, and as it turns out, they don't. And as it turns out, there are certain winning plans that we'll actually get to later that can win the game. And so, funnily enough though, and thankfully, my opponents, with, like I said, his low time, ended up later on, these kind of moves right around this area are not too important, but basically what my main purpose of playing rook to c4 was is I wanted to swing the rook to a5, kind of like a weird plan, but for some reason I thought it was going to work out to target the a7 pawn. But he played rook to b1 here. I realized that rook to a5 was no longer that viable because he has like rook to b2, and he basically just keeps harassing me here. I can't go bishop d3 because of bishop c4. So it was at this point where I was like, okay, I guess I'll just go rook c3 and just keep the game alive. And well, guess what he plays here? He plays rook to b3. So he plays rook to b3, forcing the rooks off the board. And we both didn't know it during the game yet, but actually this is a decisive mistake. And so after takes, and now king to d4, we actually basically get almost the same exact position that we saw earlier with a couple of changes. The first change is that I already have g3, h4 in place. And the second change is that basically the bishop has zigzagged its way to b3. Okay, so there's a slight advantage for white in the sense that I've already gotten g3, h4 in. Perhaps a slight advantage for black in terms of the evaluation because the bishop escaped from e8 to b3 for perhaps a more active defense. So black goes f6. I now want f4 to stop any potential g5 shenanigans. Once again, I want to fix his pawns on light squares for as long as I can. And now black goes bishop c2. So we're not going to spend too long here, because to be able to actually come up with the exact winning plan from this point out is rather difficult, given that there are a lot of possibilities, given that there are a lot of sort of key things to calculate and key things to need to consider here for white. But what I will have you guys do is I'll have you guys spend, let's say, 2 minutes here. I want to just see what your guys' intuition leads you to see, right? What are the winning possibilities? What are the potential winning continuations that you are gravitating towards here as white? Okay, so white to play here. Basically, explore your options, explore the what you think are winning continuations, and what your vision is for trying to win this endgame. All right, so I'm already giving it to you guys that this is winning for white, which of course is more information than I had during the game, because I actually thought that perhaps this was a drawn endgame, and then I just had to apply as much clock pressure as I could. At this point, I think I had like 25 minutes maybe, and he had 2. So I had a very big time advantage in that sense. So once again, it's white to play here. Your task in these 2 minutes is to try to come up with some sort of winning plan, and test your guys' intuition and understanding for what that looks like in this bishop in pawn ending. About 1 more minute to get your answers in for what white's winning plans could be here. All right, so I'm seeing a lot of good ideas, and one of the consensuses that I saw a lot of people put, and what will end up actually being the most important idea to at least consider and have awareness of, is the exchange of the light square bishops. Okay, so what the exchange of the light square bishops does, very obviously, will be transitioning us into a king opponent. And a king opponent will hopefully be easier to evaluate and lead to a concrete evaluation. And so that's what I'm going to do for you guys here. Now, I did a little bit of a tango with my opponent here. Made some scary looking moves to see if he would crack under time pressure. He played king e7 and back to d6. I then played bishop h7 here, perhaps getting him to think a little bit about if I'm going to be playing g4 h5 as a possibility. I did not. So I went back here and finally landed myself on this potential plan of trading the bishops. So this is your guys' next stopping moment. We've brought the bishop to f3, and we do have the possibility of playing bishop e4. And like we've seen with rook to d4 earlier, and like we explained, any exchange that you make, especially in an endgame, is inherently a critical moment, is already something that you must be calculating and must calculate the consequences of. And also what we know about the principles of endgames is that if you're transitioning into a king-pawn ending, oftentimes you should be able to actually calculate, perhaps even fully, the exact evaluation of the resulting king-pawn ending, and frankly, whether or not you want to go into it in the first place, right? So that's what I'm gonna have you guys do here. We're gonna take 3 minutes, obviously a lot less time than I actually had in the game to make this decision myself, but you guys have 3 minutes here. Do we play bishop e4 or not? Once again, this is a very committal decision, one that we do not have to make right now, but we could. And if it's winning, then why not, basically? But that's for you guys to decide and for you guys to calculate. All right, bishop to e4 here. You guys have 3 minutes on the clock. Remember to send your answers to me in the chat when you guys are ready. All right, 3 minutes. All right, around like 30 more seconds to put your answers in. All right, so I'm seeing a lot of good answers, a lot of answers that I expected based off of the brief calculations I expected people to be able to come up with after bishop to e4. And I also saw a lot of people with good intuition as to their feeling about bishop to e4. It went both ways. A lot of people, or not a lot of people, but a few people I saw were like bishop e4 looks right. Gave me a couple of variations to back that up, and they're like, okay, let's go bishop e4. Some people were a bit more wary. They're like, it's a very big commitment, not so sure. And then we're like, but I'll probably play it, something like that. So, and then on the other hand, I saw a lot of what I very much so like to see, which is people who were backing up whether to play bishop e4 or not with a lot of variations. And that's exactly what you want. However, I think I saw a couple people get the right answer, but most, if not all of you guys, were swayed too much about the move bishop to e4, swayed too much by very tempting variations, and in these 3 minutes, unfortunately made the wrong decision. Just like I did in the game, so don't feel too bad. Bishop e4 is in fact drawn. And what I saw many people give is something like bishop takes, king takes, and if king e6, many people saw the clever f5, which now wins for white, because eventually the black king will have to move away, and white's able to create the outside pass pawn by playing g4, and then eventually picking up the pawns on the queen side. Another variation was c5, which is actually what my opponent played in the game, thankfully. Thankfully, my opponent played this in game. He had less than a minute, and so he crumbled under the pressure. But after king takes f5, this is indeed winning. All right, so if he goes g5, takes, various ways to win here, but let's say f6, and we bring the king in, or simply enough, I was going to play in the game just king e5, and we queen check, something like this. Just in time. And if takes here, g4, very important detail. After pawn takes, king takes, we now run the pawn. This is how the game ended. But if we continue to see that this f5 move is a key winning detail for white, then as black, the side that's defending, right? If you're on the black side who's trying to defend, and you're trying to combat white's winning plans, you want to combat those winning plans with defensive ideas. So f5, unfortunately, is not the way to go. Because after f5, king d4, there will now be too much pressure with white's, well, extra tempi on the queen side, as well as white's dominant king over black's king, and now 2 avenues to attack black's weak pawns. But the drawing move is either, actually 2 moves draw, both king e7 and d7. The point now being is that if white ever goes f5, black goes g5. This is a very important detail, you guys. You must have this g5 move in response to f5, because the point now is after pawn takes, black is actually the one who is able to create the outside pass pawn. And funnily enough, white has to be a little bit careful not to already lose the game. So, what's the point here, you guys? Well, the point is, first of all, that if this was your position in a real game, you better be sure that bishop to e4 is winning before you play it. Because you might actually be missing out on what the winning plan is, which I will give you guys now 2 minutes to try to come up with. So, let's imagine it's your real game. After 10 minutes of calculation, you finally found king e7 or king d7, and you're like, dang, king upon ending is not winning. Let me try to find some other winning plan. Let me try to find some other winning idea. Let's see it, you guys. 2 minutes. 2 minutes, white to play. Try to find what that winning idea looks like here for white. A little bit less than a minute, you guys. All right. So I saw a lot of people end up coming up with the answer. A lot of it actually sort of by process of elimination in terms of like, well, we've already tried bringing the bishop this way, and what's the main decisive way forward? It is g4. However, a few of you guys were a bit too tempted here, let's say, by the prospects of f5, which may work, but it's not the cleanest. It's not the cleanest because here after pawn takes, in this endgame, I think it probably should work. It's just that, well, first of all, once again, you have to calculate the consequences of the king pawn ending, and second of all, after pawn takes with my bishop on this diagonal, it's not as clean. The most straightforward idea is to drop the bishop back to f3. And the point now is that after black waits around, we now trade with bishop to e4. And after bishop takes, king takes, something like king d7, f5, there's no more g5, no more safe g5. Takes, 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 king here, 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 and we win. Now, if black tries to stop this bishop to e4 plan with something like, let's say, f5, now the other way works. We go bishop to e2, now the bishop's coming around this way. And funny enough, there's a couple of key details here. First of all, they go bishop a2, same thing. We make a trade like this, okay? Second of all, if they go bishop c2, something like this, they'll now actually find themselves in Zugzwang here, which is kind of crazy, which is kind of nice, actually. And so I saw another question in the chat, one that I think is actually important to note, which was after this is this, if king d7 and f5 was played, what to do here? But it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Something like this. They still run out of moves. All right. So with that being said, let's go back all the way to this moment right here and reiterate what the thought process should have looked like for me, even though my 20 minutes to his 30 seconds tempted me into playing bishop to e4 and basically trying to blitz him out. First things first, I incorrectly assessed the endgame and really underestimated my possibilities and winning chances. So I actually thought that practically one of my best chances was to just go for bishop to e4, and all that I saw after bishop to e4 takes is I saw that c5 lost and king e6 lost and f5 lost. And funnily enough, after I played bishop e4 takes, I realized that king e7 and king e7 drew, and I was just like, oh, please don't play. And he didn't, and I won. So all is well in the world. But if I had the correct assessment of the endgame and correct sense that perhaps there was other possibilities, then I would have very likely taken a little bit more time to think, even just a little bit, seen g4 as a possibility, and of course explored that as a route, and probably would have played g4 instead. Because as a matter of fact, inserting g4 into that variation is just simply a better choice. Or rather, it's just simply a better version of the king and pawn ending, because black no longer has that h pawn to prevent us from creating that outside pass pawn. So a bit of a disappointing finish, actually. To first of all, I have missed rook d4 in the first place, and once again, because I had misassessed the winning chances of the bishop ending. And second of all, to actually have hastily played bishop to e4 here, instead of calculating the consequences of it. And it ended up actually still working out, but as I've probably told you guys in the past before, it is very useful, it's very important to hold yourself to a high standard of play. That even when things go well results-wise, that you should still always be looking for more. From yourself. Have a high expectation of yourself, right? If you make mistakes here, let's say right here, I made a mistake with bishop e4, I still won the game. In fact, you could even say that my decision to play bishop e4 here technically won me the game, because right after he played c5 and I won the game. And I did calculate the c5 loss, and he did play it. But it was not good. It was not objective. You know, maybe half the other time, he plays king e7, king e7, and we make a draw when I could have won by playing g4. So, even though, of course, I was happy to win this game, even though, of course, I was happy with certain moments of the game where I played well, I was still feeling, you know, a little bit like, okay, yes, I won the game, but there was still some things left on the table, right? There's still some things I need to improve upon. For example, my decision-making in this endgame, which stemmed from a lack of pure calculation, which is necessary, and a lack of full understanding as to what the correct evaluation of this endgame was in the first place. All right, let's move on to another very instructive game of mine from the event. We find ourselves right here, white to play, a very kind of chaotic position as it stands. Black has the bishop pair, opposite side castling, black's king is already exposed, but black perhaps has attacking chances, has attacking possibilities later down the line. A lot of tempting options here for white. And, well, it's going to be up to you guys to try to navigate between those options. So, white to play here, we'll go with 4 minutes. All right, of course, once again, not nearly as even close to the amount of time that I had in my real game, but we're testing you guys' brief calculations, we're testing here you guys' intuition, and seeing if you guys are pushing yourself in the right direction. And of course, if it was your own game, in a real game, I would hope that you would actually use that extra time to navigate your choices, navigate the variations, and calculate more. But in these 4 minutes here, I want each of you guys to think about this position right here, think about the characteristics of the position here, come up with some good candidate moves at the end of the day, make some sort of decision in the chat. All right, 4 minutes, you guys. about a minute left, you guys, to put your answers into the chat, start making some decisions. All right, send those final answers in if you're preparing something. This is a very complex position with, once again, a lot of candidate moves. And I saw actually a lot of the key candidate moves coming to mind for a lot of you guys' answers. I saw h6 a lot. I saw g4 a lot. I think I saw some rook takes c8, which is also, in some cases important to insert. Knight d2 to cover the c4 square. Knight g5. Knight h4. I think that was it. No, knight d3 also. Yeah, I mean, all actually moves that I considered during the game. And the one thing that I will say about a position like this, if this was your own position, your own game, and this is your own critical moment in a real game, is that it is very important to recognize what the candidate moves are to start. And of course, this should be very obvious, but oftentimes in a position as it stands like this, it's very easy to get sort of sucked into one variation and not focus on other things. So first things first, recognize that there's a lot of different candidate moves. And remember, when you calculate those various different candidate moves, it will overall inform the other characteristics of the position. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, if you start calculating rook takes d8 and takes d8, that may inform your other variations whether or not you want to trade the rooks or not. Or if you calculate like knight h4, e6, and something like that, it may inform the other variations whether or not, the knight on h4 is viable, whether or not the queen being cut off from the king side is important, stuff like that. Okay. That being said, when you lay out all those candidate moves and you calculate some sort of ideas, it still is important to sort of set in your mind a priority list, or rather, sort of like a understanding within your mind of which moves you want to calculate first. And I would say that in the game, I did not really have that priority list in mind. And a lot of my calculations were very much so all over the place. And that didn't lead me to actually just trusting my instincts. And that led me to actually missing and miscalculating a lot of things within this position. So I ended up playing h6, which is an interesting move. And the reason why I play h6 ended up not being good, and you guys were going to try to refute that in a few minutes. But to sort of react to some other moves that I saw in the chat, the main one being g4. And this move actually is the only clear path to an edge for white. There was a lot of other moves, like such as knight d2. I believe also knight d3 are slightly advantageous for white. Knight h4, unfortunately, is not the right direction because after e6, white does not really have a good follow-up. For example, if you go queen g3, I now go h6, and actually because you vacated the e3 square and you're no longer pinning my pawn on c5 to the queen, I'm now preparing c4, and big trouble is coming, actually. And if you do go h6 here, I do believe I can just take it, and the inclusion of knight h4, e6 has not necessarily helped you in capitalizing after h6. So these are some various things I had calculated, various things I had seen. And of course I had seen g4, but I had incorrectly felt a bit wary of it because I saw queen c6 here, and I saw the fact that black is preparing c4, black is now attacking the knight, sometimes the rook on h1 is loose, and once again, I let a lot of these variations and just jumbled up ideas in my mind cloud my objectivity, cloud what I should have actually calculated in this position, which is, well, okay, if I'm worried about c4 here, then why don't I just go knight d2? And in fact, after knight d2 here, black is in big trouble because the g file is completely opening up. There really is not much to even think about here in the sense that black is just in trouble. And that was the only main reason why I didn't play g4. Everything else I had sort of seen, and everything else I had sort of been like, well, I mean, white's doing really well. So once again, I feel like it was because of my inefficient as well as ineffective thought process towards this position right here that caused me to be like, well, if I throw an h6, how bad could it be? I mean, in fact, I thought that the inclusion of h6 could only help me in my chances to expose black's king and create basically an attack on the king side. And additionally, what I thought to myself is the bishop on h6 is now dependent on the queen on b6. And so I thought in a lot of variations, black is no longer really able to get a full-scale attack on the queen side. And once again, there was some very specific variations that I had just gone down the rabbit hole of, where the queen on b6 is not able to participate in the attack for whatever reason, but the main reason being it has to defend the bishop on h6. And so I played the move rook dg1 here, which once again was my intention behind playing h6 in the first place. After h6 takes, I wanted to go rook dg1. Obviously, my threat is g4, and, well, it's now your guys' turn to refute this idea of h6 rook dg1 with black's best way forward. So, black to play here. Examine your options, of course, understand the gravity of white's threats, see your different possibilities that you have here as black, and do some brief explorations. This will be the final stopping moment of today's class, and you guys have 3 minutes. 3 minutes, black to play, find your best continuation. About a minute remaining. All right. So there was basically an even split, or not actually even split. I think most people had put down what I thought was Black's not only best defense, but I thought it was pretty much Black's only defense here, which was Queen C6. A very, very logical move. Very logical move. Black goes Queen C6, similar to what we saw before. Steps out of the way of the pin, prepares C4, and stops G4. Or does it? Shanklin method. Well, we've seen time and time again in many of my lectures, in these critical moments, in these very complex variations, what happens if white does it anyways? White goes G4 here. And after G4, Queen takes F3, pawn takes F5 check, and for example, let's say bishop G7, takes, and rook H3. White ends up picking the bishop back up with either F6 or this. And so I had seen this, and I had seen at the very least, I was obviously exploring other options here if I had anything better than G4. But at the very least, I knew I had a good endgame. A very comfortable, good endgame. And I was very happy with that because I thought Queen 6 was basically forced. So when I play H6 in this rook DG1 idea, I was actually very happy with the continuations. And I completely missed continuation, if few of you guys noticed, which was rook A6. So rook to A6, defending the queen on B6 and threatening C4. And it's quite crazy because after, for example, G4, C4 takes King H8, Black's position is actually just completely winning now. Because of the now renewed threats of these two bishops lasering down the position, the tension between the queens, and for example, Queen takes B6, takes F4 with check first. And now rook to B6, and the bishops now completely dominate the knights. And white can basically resign quite soon here. Unbelievable. And to me during the game was quite unbelievable. After rook A6, I took on H6 to at least muddy the waters. And after G4, ending up swindling him later on in a pretty awful game, I would say, for myself, in terms of a lot of things that I miscalculated and just overall missed throughout the game. But yeah, I mean, even though my tournament went very well, I still wanted to show you guys the ups and the downs of my event itself. Obviously, a lot of games did go my way, and if you're curious, feel free to look at my other games. The tournament was called Semana Santa San Vicente, and I did play some good chess, even though I didn't show it today. And if you're curious what maybe I would say the best reoccurring theme from the games that I did win was, it would actually be a little bit of resilience, but mostly applying pressure. So applying pressure, I mean, it was to lower rated. So applying pressure to lower rated, essentially, like 2300. So around 100 points lower rated than me. I applied very good pressure in some of those games, and I was able to extract a lot of my wins out of slightly better positions where I was applying pressure in such a way that drew out mistakes from my opponents. So once again, if you're curious, feel free to look at those other games. But with that being said, I hope that you enjoyed the critical moments from today. We're able to compare your choices and options, which were, for a lot of you guys, synonymous with some of the moves that I had played. So you guys are making me feel better about my decision, the choices during the game. But overall, thank you guys for tuning in, of course, coming, and hope you enjoyed the class. I will see you guys in 1 month's time. I believe it's June 2nd, I think it is. for the next class that I'll be giving with once again more games from my events. All right, see you guys. Have a good night. Until next time.